Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to be chatting with Kuda Biza today. We had the pleasure of meeting him at an event in January 2020. He is one of those people that makes an impact the first time you meet him. It wasn't just the amazing conversation, but also the positive, vibrant energy he exudes. Kuda has a unique way of making you feel heard and supported, even though he has only just met you. His genuine ability to connect is off the charts. Kuda has had the enthusiasm to build businesses since he was 9 years old, washing windows so he could pay for his own ice cream in Zimbabwe. Kuda had a dream to move to the United States to attend university, and he did so with only $40 in his pocket. He is the co-founder of This Is My Era, a personal development brand that sells planners, notebooks, coffee mugs, and pen holders. He also has his podcast blog and an academy for creating whole person development to unlock your potential.
Kuda is passionate about giving back and helping the less fortunate. He created the Amani Hope Foundation, a nonprofit organization to empower underprivileged children by providing scholarships, as well as being the co-founder and CMO of Nunbelievable Baked Cookies, donates meals with every box sold. He's been in various roles of a Fortune 500 company that has seen an annual growth of sales upwards of $20 million. He's married to a wonderful woman named Ruth. We have him on our podcast for all of these incredible reasons, and we're so excited to dig into his book, The Spear Method, with him. The book was just released this summer, and we've been eagerly awaiting its arrival. If you haven't gotten a copy, please go get yourself one. Kuda has such a way with words. The book is filled with knowledge, stories, and is so relatable. He breaks down the 5 simple steps to balance success and fulfillment. We are so excited to have you here today, Kuda.
I want to meet this Kuda person. You guys are making him sound really awesome. So I also want to meet Kuda.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome.
So I have 2 questions that I want to ask you today, and I'm going to start with those. So we would love just to have you kind of share whatever it is that's on your heart with these questions. And the first one comes from a quote from your book that I'm going to read that says, "That day, curiosity did not kill the cat, but instead awakened the lion." I love that so much. And you can talk maybe a little bit about where that stemmed from. But my question is, you had such a heart at a young age for making a difference in people's lives, for serving other people. And I'm just curious if that came from the way that your parents raised you, or if that was something that you learned in the education system in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so I will start off by maybe sharing a little bit about where that quote came from. So when I was 10 years old, I used to walk to school 2 miles, every day. And on my way to school, I would always pass by this house and I would see these kids my age, not in school uniform, because we dressed up in school uniform in Zimbabwe. I don't know if you guys do the same in Canada. But, they'll be running around in their pajamas, playing, as if like they don't have to go to school or whatever. And for me, I always used to envy them actually, because I'm like, man, they don't have to deal with this. They're just like enjoying life. I want to be like them. And I was just curious as to, are they homeschooled? How come they don't go to school? And one day I decided to just stop by their house and then just kind of like hang out, play with them, but really figure out why is it that they weren't going to school. So that's the curiosity piece. So I went there and I hung out with them and, spent the afternoon there. And, as kids, you always ask like, these general questions. One of the questions I asked one of the girls, little Sarah, was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she suddenly paused and looks at me straight in my eyes. And she goes like, Kuda, my parents are dead. I don't go to school. I'm just waiting to die. So for me, first of all, I'm shocked, right? I'm like, why did I even ask this question? Like now I'm making someone feel bad, but more importantly, I'm having someone kind of like realize their situation, like it's a bad situation. In Zimbabwe, unlike a lot of the developed countries like America and Canada, public education is not free. So if you don't have money to pay for education, you don't go to school. And that was the situation with Sarah and her siblings. They were living with their grandma. Their parents had passed away, and the grandma could only provide them food and shelter. That's all she could do. You know, she didn't have much of a retirement income. So I became pissed off. So this is where the lion piece comes in, right? Because I became pissed off. I'm like, okay, how come the government is not doing anything to help kids like Sarah? How come businesses, you know, all these successful entrepreneurs, the community, right? Why aren't people just banding around and saying like, okay, $5 here, $5 here, whatever, and all chip in and have these kids go to school? So I quickly realized that if the solutions were not available in Zimbabwe, I needed to leave the country, make something of myself, and then use that as leverage to make a change. So I just had this unique desire of wanting to leave Zimbabwe because I felt like I had found my purpose, and the purpose being providing opportunities for people like Sarah. Because one of the things that I quickly realized in life was that I was blessed, right? Because my parents, both of my parents were alive. They were able to pay for my tuition to go to school in Zimbabwe, although we were not wealthy by any means. But looking at, you know, the Sarahs of the world, I was like way ahead. And instead of me just worrying about, okay, I need to get the next Xbox or whatever, someone was busy like worrying about, am I even gonna see a classroom, right? So it just put things in at a very young age into perspective for me, which then kind of like made me become this, you know, roaring lion who just wanted to make sure that I make a difference. And to answer the second part of your question, which is, was it installed by my parents or was it through education? I think it was a combination of both. And also an added element of just me, again, being curious. So my parents, you know, they would do things that were like so like unselfish. Like I remember growing up, you know, my parents would look after so many of our extended family members, people who just come and live with us while they're kind of like trying to get on their feet. They would even look after exchange students. So we'd have students from America who would come and like live with us while they were doing the exchange student program. But, you know, I also went to boarding school, and my mom used to have this habit of like just giving away stuff. So I'd come back home and like my favorite jeans or like, you know, favorite suit was handed down to someone in the village because she figured they needed it more than I did. So I just grew up, you know, in an environment where my parents were very giving. My parents are Christians. My dad was actually a preacher at the time. So, you know, they were just giving. I remember there was one time when my cousins, they had their house burned, right? Their fire caught and burned their house. And my dad was like, pack up as many clothes as you can. We need to go give them to your cousins. So there was always that foundational upbringing around giving back. And also, you know, the education system in Zimbabwe, again, it's really centered on the English system, and, you know, it's also based on Christianity. So there's always that sense of giving back. But I really feel that although those were two foundational elements, I think for me, my own personal experiences really played a key part to who I am today.
I love that so much. I honestly just have like so much energy running through me just hearing that story. And I think it's so incredible that you just had this heart at such a young age to just serve, and you didn't stop. I look at where you are now and I just see this heart of serving over and over and over again. And I think that it's just so beautiful. So thank you for sharing so much and going into that a little bit. My second question is, when you finally got everything done, you released your book, what did you have in your heart that you thought things were going to look like versus what they actually look like right now after releasing your book?
So if I'm understanding if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking about like when I released the book, what did I think was going to be the outcome versus what was the actual outcome?
Yes.
So one of the things that I've learned in life is, sometimes, especially when you're doing something new, it's good to have goals, right? Like it's super important to set goals, but you always need to be prepared for kind of like the worst. So it's like hope for the best, plan for the worst. So when I launched my book, for me it was just like if I can just get like one person to actually pay for it and buy it, for me that's like a win, right? Because I always considered myself not a writer because I'm more mathematically driven, right? I'm good with numbers. I have a master's in finance. So like I'm a numbers guy. So for me to actually just sit down for like 18 months and write a book was just, something that I never thought I would do. So I think there was some sort of like self doubt or like just me like, okay, are people really going to read this? And when I started seeing, one order come in, two, three, and then I'm starting to look into like where are these orders coming from? I like orders from Germany. Like the people in Germany that are reading my book, orders in Australia, right? So for me, it really started becoming like, oh, wow. But more importantly, when I started seeing people that I used to look up to, I still look up to them, but I had, like you mentioned in the intro, I worked at a fairly large multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company, and there were like top executives there, like people with like Ivy League MBAs, people who've achieved so much in their lives, who were sending me notes saying that, hey, we read your book and these are the things that I learned. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, like this person is like 30 years older than me, went to an Ivy League school, has accomplished so much in the corporate world, and they took an entire weekend to read my book, but even go a step further of sending me like an email with like all the things that they learned. For me, it was surprising. And it was also just like, wow, like you don't know the gifts that you have until you share them with the world. Every single one, right? Devin, Tamara, both of you guys, you have gifts that the world is waiting for you to share. And all you just have to do is share it. So like even with this podcast, right? This was a gift that you guys both had. And until you decided to do it, the world was just waiting for you to share it. So that was, for me, a big realization whereby sometimes, you let self-talk maybe talk you out of doing something. But when you actually do it, you actually realize like, oh my God, people were actually, in need of this. And if I hadn't done it, perhaps nobody would have written the spear method. So there's a quote in the book that I even talk about, which is, the graveyard is the wealthiest place in the world. Like, so many unwritten books, so many unwritten songs, so many businesses that were never started. So from my perspective, what I got out once I started, getting feedback from people is that, hey, I shouldn't be afraid to share my gifts because the people who like it and who gravitate to it, they will. And there are also going to be some people who are not going to like what you do. But I think the important key thing is that you are executing your purpose. And that's what the spear method is all about. Seek your purpose. Once you find your purpose, act on it so that you're able to impact the people that you're meant to impact. And in life, one of the other things that I've seen is that people are attracted to people who are doing stuff. So like really think about it. Like when people like form partnerships or do ecosystem mergers or whatever, you're doing it with people that are doing something. Like you'll never see Ellen DeGeneres, right? Or like Oprah invite someone who's doing nothing. Because what are they going to talk about? It's like, oh, okay, so yeah, what have you been up to? Nothing. No. but they get attracted to people who are doing stuff, right? So when you're in motion, there's you just start attracting within the universe more and more opportunities. So I'm on this podcast today because I did something. If I hadn't written that book, I wouldn't be here. You guys are also on this podcast because you did something. You went to Chris Crohn's event, right? And
Yes.
we were able to meet. And because of that, there was an attraction and more things happen. So I think the key thing that I actually take away from the book is that you should not wait to act, right? I define now as no opportunity wasted. So if an idea comes into your mind, don't waste that opportunity to actually take that idea into something meaningful, and you will see what will happen next. So I'm really excited by what you guys have done, which is you've taken the idea of like, hey, what if we could start a podcast? And you've actually started the podcast. Now just wait and see what will happen if you just consistently, act on that idea. You look back 12 months from now, and you'll be amazed by the amount of things that you'll be able to attract and also manifest as a result of your consistent action taking.
Mm.
I love it so much. And even Devin and I had this idea of if we can just serve one person, the same as you felt with your book, if just one person reads it, then I have accomplished what I set out to do. And here we are serving a ton of people. And I just love where all of this has led us to this moment right here, exactly where we're supposed to be having this conversation with you. And I know Deb can agree that we both definitely feel super blessed that we get to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Deb, if you want to move into your part, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, I think I had previously mentioned that mine are not so much questions as just open conversation that we could have about. So I absolutely love in your book when you're talking about the rent is due every day. And so a little part of that that I can just read really quickly so everyone knows what we're talking about, and then we can discuss a little bit, was that success is never owned, it is rented, and the rent is due every day. And that was by best-selling author Rory Vaden. And then you went on to elaborate and you said that you have to pay the rent every single day. Do you think that Usain Bolt or Michael Phelps would have dominated their sporting disciplines by not putting in the work daily? Do you think they would have won another gold medal by kicking back and relaxing because they won the previous Olympics? Achieving success is not easy, and maintaining it is even harder. That one, there's multiple parts in this book that really hit me, but that one hit me so hard because I think that what tends to happen with a lot of people, and I've been seeming to have this discussion a lot lately with different people, is that people think about something, you're talking about action, right? When you're discussing like just taking action. And we had this quote in one of our past podcasts that says that 1 inch of action is more than a mile of intention. And I think that a lot of people have these really great ideas, but they don't break it down into steps small enough that they can actually implement them and work on them, and that people just give up because they're not. So like, I love that quote in there where rent is due every day. It's about taking action. It's about taking the steps. And even if there's small steps, there's still steps. And I think that people sometimes, or maybe a lot of time, people just get lost in that. So I'm not sure what your knowledge that you can give us on that, but that's something that really impressioned me.
Yeah, so I think there's a whole notion, and this is something that actually led me to start a lot of the initiative that I started when I was young. So like when I was in college, I started a social enterprise called AFR Clothing, where we would donate 20% of our proceeds to educate kids in Africa. And part of the reason was that when I was in college, people would tell me that when I make it, I will start giving back. Mm. And for me, it always used to be like, what does that mean? Like when you make it, right? Success to me is not a destination. It's a process. Like a person is successful in my eyes if they're doing what they set out to do in pursuit of achieving their goals. Achieving the goal is just like a destination, it's a milestone. But if each day, if you're waking up in the morning, if you're taking action on your goals, for me, you're a successful person, right? Because, you know, inevitably you're going to achieve that success because you're doing the things that you need to do in order for you to be successful. But more importantly, you're successful in the fact that you're using your time efficiently and effectively towards the things that are important to you. So when you talk about that quote about rent is due every day, right? People have this notion of like, let's say I want to become a millionaire. When you make that first million and you actually become a millionaire, it's actually now much more harder for you to maintain that level, right? Because if I ask you for $20 and you only have $1 million and you give me the $20, you're no longer a millionaire. Right?
Yeah.
What you need to do now is to then make sure, like, if I come and ask you for $20, if you want to stay as a millionaire, you need to go find another $20 so that you're always whole, right? So a lot of the people, obviously, that are successful, like they work harder, you know, in their success. So I'll give you an example. You were talking about Nonbelievable. Some of the people who back Nonbelievable are super successful. So I'll share two. Michael Loeb. Michael Loeb is one of the guys who started Priceline.com. You know, a little bit background about him. He used to work for Time Magazine, and he had an idea while he was at Time Magazine, and then he got fired. And he got fired because he had this idea that he was pitching to them and they didn't believe in it. He then took that idea, built a company around that. And a few years later, Time Magazine ends up buying that company from him for close to $1 billion, right? Think about that. When I see Michael working now, like he's emailing me at like 2 a.m. Like he's working, but this is a guy who's had 3 companies that have exited, you know, in multi-billion-dollar transactions. But he's still working hard in order for him to maintain the success. Another one of our backers in Unbelievable is Tony Robbins. And I mean, you know, Tony doesn't really need much of an introduction, but if you see his work ethic, but he's already achieved so much, but he's still working so much. It just shows you that, you know, every single day, if you want to stay at that level, at the very least, right? You need to put in a lot of work. But if you actually want to grow, right, you actually need to work a little bit harder. And the way I like to humanize it, right? So to put it in a context that everybody can understand, it's like breathing. If you spend the day alive, it's a success, right? Because you didn't die. And part of it is because you kept breathing. A breath was due every single moment, right? Yeah. You can't stop breathing and say like, oh, because I took a breath an hour ago, I don't need to breathe for 3 more hours. It doesn't work like that. You need to constantly breathe in order for you to stay, in this case, successful, which is just staying alive. You cannot live off your last breath. So it's the same thing with success. If you took an action and it achieved a certain milestone, yes, pat yourself on the back, celebrate for 2 seconds, but focus on the next breath, right? Focus on the next action step, because that's the next thing that's gonna keep you successful. So you just always have to have that mindset. It's like, I graduated college 10 years ago. I can't still be going out and partying, celebrating my graduation night that happened 10 years ago. Like, it happened, we celebrated, yes, it was fun, but now I'm on to other things that I'm chasing. So that's the way I look at success. And I really agree with Rory when he gave that quote.
Love it. I feel like everyone needs like a Kuda in their pocket and just like pull them out and be like, all right, what do you got for me today? I love just like the energy and the knowledge that you give to us. It's incredible.
Oh goodness. I 100% agree. And I'm realizing more and more, like, as we're growing on this journey, because we haven't been as focused as we have been this year. And I had a really great conversation with a friend the other day, and she said, I'm getting really tired of seeing people say, oh, 2020, we can't wait till you're over. She said, I've never had more growth, more success, like more things that are happening in her life right now than like this is the year, because she decided to take it as, what can I do to make this better? How can I operate outside of my comfort zone to make everything in my life more abundant? And so that's the kind of people that we surround ourselves with, because that's who we are, and so then taking your step, it feels like you did mention something earlier in the book about goals, that always in front of, like, you'll meet a goal, right? Like, you always have a goal and you'll meet it. And it's not about, oh, that's it. Like you said something in there about that. Oh, that's it. That was that goal. And now I don't have to do it. You're always going to have keep creating. And you did talk about a friend that just kept jumping into a business after a business, because he would sell and then he would jump back. He didn't just stop and be like, well, I made my million and that's it. So I think that part is really important, because I think just as much as people say, if I just have this, like, if I could be happy, or like I've actually seen people post that on Facebook. If I could just be happy, then I could do all these other things. But happiness is a choice, just like everything else, so I really loved that. I loved the goal, the setting the intentions, and that you never stop just because you make $1 million. As soon as you make $1 million, I think Chris Crone talks about it. As soon as he made $1 million, he's on to the next. He's like, okay, then I'm going to make 10 million. Then I'm going to and then he reaches that. You just keep reaching for more, and which is exactly what you were talking about. And we're kind of like, I feel like, I guess my interpretation of that is I feel a little bit like new, because we're just starting, and even compared to you. So like we're still great, and we're fantastic, and we're doing well for where we're at, but we're just taking little steps. And I know that as we keep progressing, we're eventually going to be where you're at, and we're going to be like, oh, we just wrote a book and did all these amazing things. But this is where we're starting. So that's why we're so excited to have you on the show, because you're just amazing. And this actually leads into this. You talk about the SOS brain, which is the shiniest object syndrome, and that you chase a new idea every day. But I'll just read it. So he says, when you have the SOS, shiniest object syndrome, and chase every new idea that comes to your mind, you will most likely catch none. Lack of focus can easily lead to lack of achievement, because you may never apply enough energy on one thing until it is completed. Having an SOS mindset is like playing a game of whack-a-mole with your life's goals. The idea of focusing on one thing until it's complete and overcoming SOS is not limited to your goals, but also to daily tasks and projects. Focus is the key to the entire process. So we love that. Tamara and I sometimes feel like, we have hamsters in our brains, and she described something the other day about the hamsters fighting on the wheel. Like,
it was a YouTube video that I came across, and I was like, that's what goes on in our brain. They're just like these two hamsters, and they're fighting and knocking each other off the wheel, and like one would start running the other way, and then one would run this way and the other one would fall off. So that's literally what we just relate to with how our brains work. And so the shiny object syndrome is kind of like hamsters in our brain a lot of the time.
Yeah. And, for me, it's something that I really wanted to talk about in the book, because, I'm a visionary, right? So I have so many ideas percolating in my head at any given moment. Like, I have this like little black book that I, travel with. It's like where I just put all my ideas. And, I've learned to be disciplined enough to really then sit down and say, like, well, this is a really good idea, but not right now, right? Because right now the focus is this idea. Let's get it across the line. Because when I was writing the book, I was like, okay, now I need to get into speaking. Now I need to do all of that. Like, no, wait, finish the book. And then once the book is done, then you can look into all these other things. But I think what's important, though, I want to touch to a point where you spoke about, which was like, hey, I just want to be happy. it comes back down to the SPEAR method. So for people who haven't read the book, I'm just going to give them a breakdown what the SPEAR method is, and then connect how it ties into everything that we're talking about. So the SPEAR method, really, it's 5 steps. The first step, which is S, it's seek your purpose, right? You want to seek your why. You want to really understand what your calling is. Because we have a lot of people out there who are busy living other people's lives. Now, we were talking about the shiniest object syndrome, right? And part of why a lot of people suffer from that is because if you don't have clarity on your purpose, anything is, sexy or interesting or the next big thing, because you don't have clarity on what your calling is. But if you actually take the time and really understand what is my calling, what is my purpose, what is my why, it will help filter a lot of the distractions that will come your way. So from my perspective, the ideas or business ventures and business proposals that are sent to my desk, and the moment I quickly read it, I know it's not in alignment with my purpose. It makes the decision making so easy that I don't have to now worry about having to evaluate that or maybe struggle with shiniest object syndrome, because yes, it's a shiny object, but it's not in my lane, right? It's for someone else. So I immediately take it out, and it helps filter things out. But then the next phase after you've understood your purpose and your calling is planning, right? Because the challenge is, if you know your calling and you know your why, but you actually never take the time to plan, chances are you're never going to achieve it, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. We all know that. So the second step of the SPEAR method is planning. When I went to college, I double majored. I majored in business and I majored in aviation. And what I found interesting was that when I would be in business classes, right, my business professors would be telling me, every business needs a business plan. Okay, cool. Then I'll go to the School of Aviation to learn how to fly. And what they'll tell me is every flight needs a flight plan. So essentially, every life also needs a plan. You see, because if you have this destination that you want to arrive at in your life, but you don't have some sort of idea or plan on how you're going to get there, chances are you're never really going to get there. So let's use an example. My plan was to come to America, right? And well, it wasn't the plan, but it was the vision, right? It was the goal. I want to come to America. And I had to put a plan in place in order to make that happen. So, for example, one of the key things I started thinking about when I was putting together the plan was like, okay, I'm going to need to take my SATs because I need to take the exam in order for the schools to evaluate me, whatever. So I had to be thinking about that. I needed to study for the SAT. I needed to apply to school, because if you want to come here and study, but you never apply, how are you going to be accepted and get a student visa to come and study? And as I was putting together this plan, I quickly realized the number one resource at the time that I needed was internet. And guess what? We didn't have any internet in my house. So I came up with a plan. And the plan was go work at an internet cafe, because then if I was working at an internet cafe, I'm going to get free internet. So I went to the owner of the cafe and like, hey, can I work night shift? Because I'd figured out that, okay, if I work from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., and then we close up at 11 p.m., I could sleep in the internet cafe from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., and now I have 7 hours, basically like a full work day where I could use the internet uninterrupted by myself. So I was able to study for the SATs. I was able to apply to all these colleges and all that stuff because I had a plan in place. My other high school classmates, they'll be like, oh yeah, I want to go to America, but they would never take the time to actually plan to think like, what would it take? When the time came, we're like, okay, now schools are accepting people, and they hadn't studied for the SATs. They hadn't taken the time to really think about all the things that they needed. They never ended up achieving that goal because they didn't plan. But the next thing that follows plan is E, which is execute, right? Because if you come up with a plan and you don't execute, then it's worthless. So like, let's say in my case, If I had come up with a plan of like, okay, I need to find internet, and if I actually hadn't taken the time to submit my resume, interview for the job and actually work and do all that stuff, I wouldn't have had my plan come to life. Same thing with writing a book. If I had this vision and this plan, it's like, okay, I'm going to write 3,000 words a day, blah, 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 and come up with this beautiful plan, but never actually sat down to do it, the book wouldn't be there. So execution is key. And I like to say that there are 3 important days in life: the day you're born, the day you find out why, and each day you act on your why. So taking action every single day on your why is essential, because time is a limited resource. I have 24 hours in a day, you have 24 hours in a day, you have 24 hours in a day. Even if you're a billionaire, there's nothing you can do to go buy an extra hour so that your day has 25. We all have 24, right? So what you then need to do is you need to make sure that every single day you're scheduling time to act on your why, because that is the thing that will energize you. That is the thing that will ultimately give you happiness, because you're making progress on that purpose that's super important to you.
Yes.
And then the next phase of the SPEAR method is achieve. Now, this one is interesting because when you take action, you're going to achieve a result. It's a law, right? You take action, you achieve something. It could be 100%, it could be 5%, it could be 20%, whatever. So the key thing is you want to make sure that you're measuring and tracking your progress, or quote unquote, your achievements towards your goals. Because whatever you measure, you can manage. So if you know, like, okay, I want to achieve this, I took this action and now I'm here, the gap that you now need to fill to then close it. But the first and most important achievement that any of us make is that first step outside of our comfort zone. Because when you're seeking your purpose, when you're seeking your why, it's going to require you to get outside of your comfort zone. Because, if you're really truly setting stretch goals, so I'm not talking about, like comfortable goals or things that you're going to achieve. Like I know how to run a 10K. Like I can run a 10K in my sleep without even training and won't get sore. But a goal is me running a marathon. So that's a goal. So for me, the first achievement is actually that first step I take outside of my comfort zone to say, like, okay, today I'm going to go try to run half a marathon. That in itself is a goal. So is an achievement, sorry. So it's super important for you to constantly be looking at how can you be stepping outside of your comfort zone consistently. And then the last phase of the SPEAR method is repeat, because, for you to achieve your purpose, that journey can literally take a lifetime, right? Yeah. But what you need to do is you need to break down that purpose into certain milestones. So now when you achieve a milestone, you repeat that same process to achieve that next milestone, which is exactly what we were talking about before, about rent is due every single day. So if I wake up today and I, plan my day and I do certain actions towards my purpose and I achieve a certain result, tomorrow morning, guess what? I have to repeat that same process again in order to keep that, movement in motion, right? In order for me to stay in motion, I have to continuously repeat. And what that will ultimately do is it will ultimately bring me happiness, because as human beings, if we're not growing, we're dying. A lot of the times people feel depressed or sad or unhappy is because you can't really articulate any growth or progress in your life. But if you're seeing growth and progress in your life, it could be like, let's say, even just like losing weight. Let's say the ultimate goal is you want to lose 100 pounds, but if you're not seeing any progress, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be sad. But if you can articulate like, oh, wow, I lost 10 pounds last week, you're going to be happy, you're going to be proud, because you're showing progress towards your goal. You haven't hit your goal yet of losing 100 pounds, But just the mere fact that you went from, you needed to lose 100 pounds and now you need to lose 90, you are going to be happy, you're going to be excited, you're going to be thrilled because there's some forward momentum in your life. And that's what then gives you the happiness. So it's super important for you to be taking action and repeating that action consistently, because that will ultimately give you happiness. Because as humans, like I said, if you're not growing, you're dying. And when something is dying, it's not a pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. Actually, I don't know, like sometimes for myself, I don't always know, it feels like I don't always know how to articulate because actually when I was at one of the masterminds, and I shared this with Tamara too, and actually all of our girls in our book club, but there's like a part in your brain that only understands emotion. So that's where like when someone asks you how you're feeling about something, and maybe you just feel so much joy, but you don't know how to like word that, and you'll just get like a heavy sigh, or you'll just like make a noise that is that emotion, but it's not actually something that you can speak of. That's how I felt when you were talking about the actions, because like that is the part of the journey that gets you to like, so I just had like this vision of like our lives, and where you're just taking action after action, and it's not about getting to the end, it's just about the steps in between, the journey, the path.
Mm-hmm.
And
find
like
joy.
Oh, I felt that so much. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but that's how I just felt it so deeply in my heart. I was like, huh, that's it. Like, it all correlated and it all clicked. It was because I say that, but then, like, sometimes it just takes someone else wording it in a way in the perfect moment, however it is, the perfect energy, and it just aligns with your soul and it just hits you really hard. And that's how I felt.
It's just
nothing.
that process and finding joy in the process while we're on our journey of here until there.
Yeah. So thank you. That really hit my heart big time.
Cool.
Yes.
So do you guys have any other questions around the SPEAR method, the book, anything you want me to cover?
I think for me, I would love for you to let our listeners know where they can find your book so that they can get themselves a copy, because I feel like everybody honestly needs to dig into this book. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, so there are a few places you can find my book, but my two favorite are number one, obviously my website. So spearmethod.com. So you can go to that website. That's my personal website. You can buy my book there. And also you can just connect with me on the contact form on that website. So that's number one. Number two, it's Amazon. So you can just go on Amazon and you can buy either the Kindle version, the ebook, or you can actually buy the physical copy and Amazon will ship it to you. So if you're in Canada or wherever, they're able to get the book to you. And obviously, if you read it and you love it, I would be honored if you would, just leave a review on Amazon so that you can let other readers know what you think about the book and also get them to buy.
Awesome. That's great. I don't know, Dev, is there anything else you want to add?
I think that, I could honestly talk to you for a very long time, but we'll keep it to the half hour, just slightly over half an hour. And thank you so much for joining us today, Kuda. That was so lovely seeing your face.
Absolutely.
No, thank you so much, guys. And I'm really proud of you guys, doing this. I think it's super important to be sharing your thoughts, your ideas, and bringing other people to this platform so that, your community can listen to it. So I just want to say kudos to you for just taking that leap of faith and just doing it. And, over time, you're going to see what you guys are going to be able to achieve. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on you guys as you're building this platform. And I can't wait to see some of the people that you bring onto this platform. And lastly, I want to give a gift to your community. So if people actually do go to the SPEAR method, they can just type in Aspire 30, and they'll be able to get a 30% off discount on the book, the spear method, when they buy it on my website.
It's
Thank you so
amazing.
much.
What an incredible gift. And thank you so much for just your kind thoughts and words towards us and for supporting us on this journey. It really means so much to us. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, and have a wonderful day. And I can't wait to see what you guys do with this platform.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kuda.